When you work with JavaScript, you're going to start to see this really weird three-dot notation with a little name or some sort of text beside it start to appear in a lot of different places. And if you Google what that notation means, you're going to notice that sometimes people refer to it as the spread operator, and sometimes they refer to it as the rest operator. It is in fact just one operator with two different names. I'm going to call it the spread operator, but as we start to go through this, you'll understand why sometimes people call it the rest operator. So, what is the spread operator? The spread operator is three dots with a name or some sort of, label attached to it. Args, items, things, etc. And what it does is it takes a bunch of different items and puts them into a single collection so that you can manipulate it as one thing. So by default, that collection is going to be an array. Let's say that you have a function that compiles a grocery list from a number of values that are passed to it. Now, a grocery list can have nothing in it if you didn't have anything you needed that week, or it can have one thing or two things or 100 things. So we don't know how many items might be passed to this grocery list. It's an unknown number. There's a bunch of different ways you can handle this, but one of the ways you could handle this is using the spread operator. So let's write this function. Function grocery list. Now, instead of having different names for our different arguments, because we don't know how many there might be, we'll use the spread operator. So that's three dots, and then we'll call it items. Now, if I console log out items, I'm going to get an array of all of the arguments that are passed to this function. So let's see if that actually works. Let's see, grocery list, and I'm going to pass it a bunch of items. And voila, we have an array with eggs, apples, flour, and cloves. This is really nice because, again, it works really elegantly with an unknown number of items. So if I passed it nothing, you can see that it didn't become undefined or error out in any way. In fact, it just gave us an empty array. When you use the spread operator, by default, you can guarantee that you're going to get some kind of array, even if it is empty. Now, here's the really fun part. This is why sometimes it's called the rest operator. You can use it to collect the end of something. So let's say that whatever grocery list we want to create, we have this convention that the most urgent item is always going to be the first item that we pass. So in this case, if we pass it, again, our list, we want to take that urgent item and store it in its own variable because maybe we need to pass that to some sort of service so it can be, picked up for us quickly or what have you. Now I'm just making up things here. In this case, I can give that first value a argument name, so urgent item. Then for the rest of them, we can still collect them into an items array. So now if I save this, you can see that the items array only has apples, flour, and cloves. It doesn't actually have eggs. That was plucked away into urgent item. So if I also console log out urgent item, you can see that that is separate. It exists, and we have the rest of our items in their own array. This, again, still works even if you pass it no items. In this case, urgent item is going to become undefined, but then items is still this empty array that you can work with. So that's really, really nice. Another thing you can do with it is you can spread one array into another array. Let's say that I have my grocery list, Ruben needs all of these things, and I want to compile this and every other family member's items into a larger grocery list, right? So now we could have a different grocery list, the family groceries, and that's an array as well. And I can spread my Ruben needs array in here. And then if I console that out, you can see that it's an array with all the things that I wanted. Notice that it didn't take an array and put it into another array. It took the individual items in the Ruben needs array and then popped them into the family grocery list, giving us a nice flat array, which also means that if I need to add other things here, I can simply hit comma and then add, let's say, gummies. And now we have an array with all the items that I wanted plus gummies. And off to the grocery list, the grocery store we go. You can also take an array and spread it into an object. So let's say I have my Aruba needs, and for whatever reason, the grocery list for the family needs to be an object, right? So let's create that object by opening up some curly braces, and we're going to use that spread notation to spread Aruba needs in there. And then let's say we label gummies with kids because it's the kids that wanted the gummies. Now, if we console log that out, notice that it took that array, it noticed that it was an array, and the index of every item became the key, and then the actual array item became the value. And so we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and then kids. So that's, sometimes you need to take an array and turn it into an object, and the spread operator can do that for you pretty elegantly. What you can't do is spread an object into an array because it's not going to know what to do with the property names, right? In PHP, we have flat arrays and we have associative arrays, right? But in JavaScript, we just have our flat arrays, and then if we need anything like an associative array, we use an object. And objects are not iterable. You can't iterate over them, and therefore you cannot spread them. There's no logic to how you might want to do that. Does the key become the actual thing, or what's the index? It makes no sense. So you can't really do that. However, you can spread a object into another object. So let's say that I have an identity object and it has my first name, my last name, and my age. Let's correct that in this, but I'm making a larger object that has other information about me too, like say my favorite color. So we could create a object called Aruba. Let's make that lowercase, I don't like that. And in here, I can spread the identity array. And if I console log that out, you can see it has all of the properties and values from the identity array. And now I can also maybe give it a favorite color. So, color equals, or not equals, colon, green. And now there's my favorite color in there, my first name, my last name, and my age. But here's the thing. Notice how I put color in the Aruba object first, and then we have identity. But what if the identity object also had the color property in it? So color is black. Now if I save that, notice that in the final Aruba object, the color is black. It's not green like we added in Aruba. That's because the last version of the property in an object is going to be seen as the correct value. It's a lot like CSS. If you had display block and display flex on the same class, display flex came last, and that's going to be taken as the value to be used, which is why in JavaScript, the best practice is that if you need to spread into an object into another object, make sure you do the spreading first and then add your custom properties. That way, if that object had that property in it as well, it gets overwritten by the property you actually wanted. So when I fix that, you can see the color is now in fact green, which is my favorite color, not black. And that is how you spread values into another thing using the spread operator, sometimes also called the rest operator.